Batman Arkham franchise is considered by many to be the pinnacle of the superhero video game genre, with Rocksteady Studios taking the Batman universe into their own hands and creating what I personally believe is one of the best interpretations of the Batman IP. The Arkham franchise is one of my favorite game series ever. I even played through Asylum on my channel before, and I would highly recommend all of them, yes, even Origins, to anyone who is even mildly interested in Batman or enjoys a good, captivating story as well as fantastic beat-em-up gameplay. After the release of the final game in the series, Arkham Knight in 2015, fans were left craving more Arkham, despite the fact that Rocksteady seemed to be done with the series. However, in August 2020 at DC Fandom, a surprise trailer was dropped for a new Batman game, Gotham Knights, but it wasn't a Rocksteady game. Warner Bros. Montreal was undertaking the task, and having previously made Arkham Origins, which had a similar playstyle and format to the main Arkham trilogy, many had high hopes for the game, especially as it included some intriguing features like co-op, multiple playable characters in free roam, and a focus on the Bat family. However, as more information came out, people became increasingly skeptical about the game upon hearing it had features such as enemy health bars, lootable and craftable gear, and leveling, which weren't present features in the Arkham series. I personally was interested in the game at first, and even had it pre-ordered until I decided to cancel as I kept getting more skeptical about it, especially after learning it was only 30 frames per second on console, and went to the wait until it's cheaper line of thinking. Well, it finally dropped to $20.99 in the Xbox summer sale, with the Deluxe Edition content on sale for $10 as well. Looking for a game to play and content to make, I decided to finally buy the game and see just how well it stacked up to the Arkham games. One of the strongest points of the Arkham series was its storytelling, with each game crafting complex, well-written, and interesting stories that were also supplemented with side quests and multiple supervillains to take down. Right out of the gate, I thought that the story premise for Gotham Knights was compelling and provided a blank canvas with a lot of potential. The game starts with Batman actually dying in battle against Ra's al Ghul in a cinematic as he blows up the Batcave to stop him. In the aftermath, the Bat family, consisting of Dick Grayson, aka Nightwing, Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl, Jason Todd, aka Red Hood, and Tim Drake, aka Robin, are thrust into the position of Gotham's new protectors with the help of Alfred. The story deals a lot with the Bat family's struggles to fit into their new roles as Gotham's protectors, as well as try and fill the shoes of the Dark Knight. I thought there were some really good aspects to the story that really shined, but I also felt that there were certain parts that were lacking in depth and quality, especially when compared to the Arkham series. My favorite part of the story was the character dynamics between the Bat family, which is good because it's arguably the most important aspect. Almost any time they're on screen together, it's interesting to see how they interact with each other due to their different personalities, which can either lead to minor clashes, funny interactions, or even heartfelt moments. Another interesting thing that they did with the game is that each character gets dedicated side missions that try and help flesh out their characterization and their emotions. Unfortunately, the quality for these missions wasn't quite the same for each character, and they ended up being just long cutscenes with no gameplay. While I found the Red Hood and Batgirl missions pretty interesting, the Robin and Nightwing missions felt like they were a little lacking in depth and character moments. While some of the missions may have not been the strongest, I still think that it helped us to see how these characters think and feel outside the mask, as a lot of these missions occur back in the Belfry, which is where you go in between patrols. In the Arkham series, you almost never saw Bruce out of his suit, so seeing the Bat family able to interact outside of the suits in their base of operation was interesting, and a nice way to make them a bit more relatable as we see what they do outside of vigilante work. Besides the character moments, the story did unfortunately end up feeling a bit lacking to me. It has its ups and downs, but when it was all said and done, at the end of the game, not much had really resonated with me. First of all, one of my major complaints has to be the lack of villains in the game. I remember watching videos before the game came out where the developers were talking about villain side missions, and how you had to help take down some of Batman's famous rogues. Going into the game, I was in the mindset that it was going to be like Arkham Knight, which had side stories and missions where you took down various members of Batman's rogues gallery, such as Hush, Firefly, Riddler, Two-Face, etc. Gotham Knights started off strong with Mr. Freeze, Harley Quinn, and Clayface, who all had side stories with multiple missions in them. Then, nothing. Those were the only supervillains who you took down outside of the main campaign, which itself only has you take down one major villain. Penguin is featured as a side character, but you never really fight him, as he is a supposedly legitimate businessman now. This really disappointed me, as Batman has an iconic rogues gallery that I really wanted to see interacting with the Bat family, especially as the villains find out Batman is dead. There's been some rumors recently of some potential DLC releasing, so I might get my wish fulfilled, but it shouldn't have to be relegated to some DLC that isn't the main game. While Arkham Knight did have some good DLC with more villain side missions, there were already plenty of villain side missions in the game. Instead of more villain side missions, we have civilian side characters who give you generic missions to stop X amount of crimes or take out X amount of enemies that are repeatable for crafting materials and XP, which is also kind of pointless because by the time you finish the game you'll be max level and the XP won't matter in the end game. Now, this is a section where we're going into some major spoilers for the game, so if you want to avoid them, skip ahead. I'll have a timestamp. Also, if you're enjoying the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing. And if you've played the game, let me know in the comments if you enjoyed it and how you think it stacks up to the Arkham games. But anyways, let's get into it. I'll give you a second just in case. I wasn't really a fan of where the game went story-wise. The major villain of the game was touted to be the Court of Owls, a secret organization of Gotham's elite who bribe, threaten, and even kill to get whatever they want. In order to accomplish their goals, they utilize an army of undead soldiers called Talons, who are like feral zombie ninjas. We go through the whole game and capture the leader of the court, only for, surprise surprise, Talia al Ghul to shoot him dead in the street. This would have been shocking had we not known that Talia was still in the city, just because it seems like something the League of Shadows would do. The game then switches to the League of Shadows being the main villains. Now to be fair, this section of the game did include some fun bits, like fighting a man-bat in the ruins of Arkham Asylum, but then the end of the game felt wildly underwhelming. You find out where the signal calling all the man-bats is coming from, which happens to be a tomb in the cemetery. After navigating through the tomb, which of course was a secret passageway, you realize you're in the Batcave. Then Talia reveals she, unsurprisingly, revived Batman. You fight Batman, then get him back to his senses. You then fight Talia and defeat her, but a bunch of the Court of Owls shows up. I thought this would be a really cool moment where maybe the rest of the Bat family would show up, and there would be an epic team battle, but unfortunately Batman just ends up kamikazeing them with a half-destroyed Batplane. Then a final cutscene plays where the character you're playing as addresses the city, saying that the Court of Owls is bad and that they're going to work to stop them. But wait, wasn't that the point of the story? By the end of the game, Court of Owls seemed like a non-existent threat that was playing second fiddle to the League of Shadows, which is a shame as we've never seen the Court of Owls in a game before, and I was looking forward to them getting some exposure outside of the comics. I also found it incredibly strange that none of the other Bat family members were featured at the end of the game, not to witness Bruce's resurrection and eventual second death, not to help in the final battle, not in the address to the city, or any of the final cutscenes. The whole game was about them working together to be protectors to the city, but at the end, only the character you're playing as is featured. It's an incredibly confusing move that undermines the theme and story of the entire game, as well as providing an unsatisfying, rushed conclusion to the game. Besides the story, the other biggest draw to the Arkham series was the gameplay. Since the gameplay is such a big part of the game, I'm going to break this down a little further into two categories: combat and non-combat. First, let's talk about combat. With combat being the main gameplay loop in Gotham Knights, it's understandably an important aspect of the game, especially once you compare it to the amazing combat of the Arkham series. Since the studio who made this game did the mainline Arkham series spin-off Arkham Origins, which played similar to the main game's combat-wise, I had high hopes for this game's combat. The Arkham combat style was so fluid and consistent that you could truly feel like you were a skilled hand-to-hand combatant and were flawlessly taking out enemies left and right. Unfortunately for Gotham Knights, the combat isn't on the same level as the Arkham games, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Initially, when I first started playing the game, I was not a fan of the combat, even going so far as to take notes about how bad it was for this video. However, after doing that, I went back to finish the game and took a better look at the combat and realized that, while obviously not on the level of the Arkham combat, it had its own unique style that worked well and also helped distance it from the Arkham series. The biggest difference in combat between the two games, in my opinion, is the fact that Gotham Knights has no counter function. In the Arkham games, you were able to block most attacks from normal thugs and counter them with a hit to them. It was really epic, and you could end up doing multiple blocks at once or in a row and feel like a complete badass. This was what helped combat flow so well, as you had a consistent input of buttons and actions that didn't break up combat. However, Gotham Knights decided to employ a different method than counters: dodges. Instead of countering moves and blocking them, you just dodge every attack. This seemed like an odd thing to do, as in my eyes, countering would probably be more efficient in combat and would make the Bat family seem a bit more competent. It's hard to feel like a badass when instead of countering attacks, you'd instead have to dodge. I could understand if it was different for each character. For example, it would work really well for Nightwing, as his acrobatic fighting style would be suited to dodging hits. Conversely, someone like Red Hood, who is more bulky and tanky, would definitely be more suited to straight up countering instead of dodging. While I can see the merits of changing counters for dodges to help differentiate between the games, I think that the rest of the combat already differs enough that it was unnecessary and adds an unintended consequence of making the characters seem less capable. One of the best things about the combat in Gotham Knights is the fact that each character feels different while playing them. While they all have the same basic functions during combat, each character goes about it differently. Nightwing is combo based and very athletic, so he's very quick and able to do some more acrobatic moves while fighting. Batgirl's a bruiser. She hits quick and hard and has a lot of technology based upgrades and abilities. Red Hood has pistols that use rubber bullets, so he has a unique feature where his combos are chained via range attacks as opposed to his melee attacks. Finally, Robin uses a bow staff with a long range and is the stealth specialist, with some stealth-focused upgrades and abilities. Each character has their own range attack in this game as well. Whether darts, batarangs, bullets, or a slingshot, ranged attacks allow you to hit enemies across the room, which can help hit an enemy who's about to shoot, or take down a fleeing thug who only has a sliver of health left. While you were able to play as these characters in the Arkham series, it was only in specific gameplay moments or DLC fights. You could never do free roam roam with them unless you modded the PC version. I actually love that each character plays differently, as it helps break the game up and makes it rewarding to actually swap out and learn the different gameplay styles of the characters. I try to swap out characters as often as possible to really get a feel for all of them, and while I had a favorite, Robin, because Tim is the best, I enjoyed playing all of the characters and using their unique abilities to fight crime. Each character also has their own momentum abilities, which are this game's equivalent to free flow combos in the Arkham series, where once you built up a big enough combo, you could do special moves that would take down enemies or destroy equipment. In this game, the momentum abilities are special combo attacks that do extra damage. They're an interesting change from the free flow combos, but I also felt that they were underwhelming. While it was admirable that each character has 8 special moves, I didn't find myself using all of them. For each character, I ended up only using 1 to 2 of their special momentum moves every once in a while. Each character also has an ultimate move as well, and to be honest, none of them felt that effective. While it would do damage, it never felt worth it to actually activate them, and I would rather save my momentum for the other abilities, which would feel more useful. Next up, stealth. Predator encounters were always special and unique sections of the Arkham games that allowed you to be calculated and analytical about the way you approached them. You could put explosive gel on a wall to take out one enemy, then when someone was walking past to investigate the commotion, you could snap them up to the gargoyle and leave them hang with an inverted takedown. While these sections sometimes went wrong, and if you played them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It was rewarding as hell if you managed to do a Predator encounter without getting spotted or getting shot. Unfortunately, Gotham Knights doesn't quite do stealth to the same pedigree that the Arkham series did. While there are stealthable sections of the game, there's no true stealth sections. It is nice that stealth is a viable option, as when the game was first announced, people were afraid that health bars meant that stealth wouldn't fully take out an enemy. However, there were no sections of the game that stood out to me like they were specifically designed for stealth. There weren't rooms with floor grates and tons of vantage points, and unlike in the Arkham series, when you messed up you didn't have a mini heart attack as 10 people with guns rushed to shoot at you, because the enemies in this game just weren't that deadly. Even doing missions with hostages, even if you got spotted, you had a timer with about a minute on it to save the hostages before they would be injured / killed. I would say this, again, probably boils down to them trying to distance themselves from the Arkham games and make Gotham Knights their own unique take. But is it a good idea to distance yourself from one of the Bat family's main strengths and best gameplay mechanics? One unique way the game does differentiate itself from the Arkham games is that there are elemental effects. This applies to both enemies and players, as you can utilize specific elemental effects that do more damage or less damage to differently typed enemies. While I think this was an interesting idea to give enemies elemental effects, I wasn't a fan of the fact that players also had to take into account what elemental effects they had equipped. I think that if there was an easier way to seamlessly use these effects on the fly, it would be better. The only way to utilize these effects towards enemies is via specific crafted or found melee and ranged weapons that you have to manually swap to in the character screen. Oh, another unique feature I'll point out is the fact that you can straight up murder enemies. No, it's not a glitch, and I'm not joking. Developers apparently left off safety boundaries around certain buildings, so if you do a silent takedown from a ledge of a tall building, or grab and throw enemies, you just throw them off the roof. The first time I did this, I was laughing so hard because I was expecting them to just bounce back from a grapple around their ankle, but no. They just flew right into the ground dying. While this is a really funny thing that can happen, it also is kind of an example of something that shouldn't happen. These characters aren't killers, as evidenced through the story, and just general knowledge that Batman, and by extension, the Bat family, although maybe minus Jason, don't kill. I'm 50-50 on this because while it is really wacky and kind of funny, it also seems like a lazy mistake by the developers. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. I want to hear your opinions. Finally, the last thing I'll talk about combat-wise is the enemies of the game. Like in the Arkham series, this game employs a variety of enemy types to spice up combat situations. However, just like other features in the game, they simply don't compare to the Arkham enemy variety. In the Arkham games, there are enemies who use riot shields, knives, shock sticks, and body armor, and you have to utilize a variety of different methods to counter and defeat them. Whether it's stunning someone with your cave to beat them down, dodging over an enemy to hit them from behind, or even using a combo move to break their equipment, their presence requires you to use your brain to identify threats and assess how to take them down, just like Batman. In Gotham Knights, however, that factor is pretty much non-existent, as almost all the enemies are taken down just by repeating normal attacks, using a heavy attack to break enemy defense, or by stunning an enemy first with a charged ranged attack, then attacking. The combat loop for this game is quite repetitive and unchallenging, as you don't have these different enemy types to break up the monotony, and everything is basically just punch, punch, punch until the enemy goes down. Although I will say, it is still fun. There are never a lot of enemies in combat rooms either. The max I've seen is about 10, unless you're in a heroic assault, which is a special mode where you go floor by floor to clear a dungeon, but it's pretty much endgame content and completely optional as well. Overall, I think that the combat in Gotham Knights is good and puts its own spin on the beat 'em up genre, but it definitely has room for improvement for it to be considered on par to the Arkham series combat. Non-combat / free roam. When not in combat, the rest of the time spent in the game is mostly traversing around the world to reach missions, free roaming to stop crime, or spending time at the Belfry between missions where you can train and replay boss battles. Traversing around Gotham City was always fun in the Arkham series, as you were able to grapple and glide from rooftop to rooftop to reach the objective. There was also the Batmobile you were able to drive around and navigate Gotham and Arkham Knight. In the Gotham Knights, there's a similar feature with the Bat Cycle. Unfortunately, in both cases, grappling, gliding, and driving, this game again lags behind the Arkham series. Due to the nature of the Bat family, mainly the fact that 3 out of the 4 don't have capes on their basic costumes, there is no gliding on this game unless you play as Batgirl. Each character has their own method of transportation besides just grappling around the city, but even then you have to do several missions to unlock it, which is a bit ridiculous. While Batgirl's glide and Nightwing's trapeze glider are pretty good, Robin's slideaways teleport and Red Hood's mystic leap are a bit lackluster. Robin's slideaways is Justice League teleporter that you basically hold on a button, then drag your in-game cursor across the map as far as you can, then he teleports out. But the cursor is a little slow and doesn't seem intuitive, as you could likely travel just as fast by strictly grappling. Red Hood's mystical leap was just kind of funny because the devs clearly had to find some alternate transportation method for him, but it's basically just him letting him jump using some strange magical energy he gained from being revived in the Lazarus pit. It's also hard to use, especially when having to turn since you're traveling a decent distance each jump. While I understand why they can't have all of them glide, I think that they should have given Robin a cape to glide, and Red Hood and Nightwing could have both got the same glider, as then it would have felt like a much more balanced system, and traversal wouldn't be such a chore with certain characters. While the Bat Cycle is a bit more of a reliable mode of transportation, it still ends up feeling a bit stiff and isn't as fun as the Batmobile in Arkham Knight. There's also this kind of cheesy fast lines filter that shows up during traversal, and when on the Bat Cycle, once you get up to speed, it plays the same music track every time. It's not really a huge deal, but it just feels a little cheesy, tricking you into think you're going fast, while in reality, you're just going normal speed. You can see this if you rotate the camera while driving, and once the lines go away, it's clear you're probably maxing out at 35 miles an hour. During free roam, one thing you're obviously encouraged to do is stop the random crimes that happen. You can press a button to activate your AR vision, this game's version of a detective mode, and to look for nearby threats and missions to complete while in free roam. And let me just talk about the AR vision for a second, because compared to the Arkham detective mode, it's very lacking. While it illuminates the surrounding enemies and interactable objects, it only quickly pings it. In order to get a good look at everything, you have to hold the button down, and even then things aren't that well illuminated and you can't move while doing it. I can see what they were going for with it, but I think that it should have been tap to activate, then tap again to turn off, as that's one thing that would have already made it leagues better than it is currently. But anyways, free roam missions. The draw of completing these missions is to get XP and gear rewards that will allow you to power up your character. While they start off as being a diverse set of missions with different gameplay loops, after a point, it loses its luster a bit, as they can get a little repetitive. They usually boil down to go here, fight these enemies, and sometimes fight several more waves of enemies. While they're not the worst missions ever, I wish there was some more variety. I saw someone describe the gameplay loop as a superhero crime fighting simulator, and to be honest, it's not a bad way to put it. I found that while the missions may be repetitive, I enjoyed traveling the city and stopping crime, as it was just sort of relaxing and it felt good to help rid the city of crime. This is one area where I would say Gotham Knights has an edge on the Arkham series, as once you beat the Arkham games, there isn't a lot of replayability outside the story mode. Sure, you can go around and still beat people up, there's no mission structure, rewards, or a sense of fulfillment as you save an unlucky cop or citizen from getting their shit kicked out of them. There is one weird part about the civilians in this game though. No, it's not the fact that you can beat up the police because they don't trust you, based Gotham Knights. It's the fact that you can beat the snot out of civilians for some reason. Like, literally, you can just go up to a civilian and just start beating them. You can save someone from being robbed, then just turn around and start hitting them as they try to thank you for saving them. It's an interesting design choice for sure, and I don't really know why this is a feature, kind of like the murdering the criminals point from earlier. There's no morality or public perception meter, which could be an interesting concept of trying to get the public/police back on your side, but there's really no reason to leave the ability to beat civilians in. I'm not sure if this is a mistake or on purpose, but it is kind of funny. There's also the dreaded collectibles while free roaming, but don't worry, there's no Riddler trophies. Oh, I think I just heard the entire Arkham player base sigh in relief. There's batarangs to collect, location plaques to scan, art to scan, and there's some pages of a book on the Court of Owls that you're able to collect as well. I actually ended up spotting quite a few of the batarangs while playing through the game, but I eventually had to look up a guide to find the rest. Unfortunately, there's no way to get the collectibles marked on the map like there were for Riddler trophies in the Arkham games, where you could interrogate thugs for secrets. The AR mode again struggles here, as it's really hard to find the collectibles while using it. Even a giant mural you can scan might not even stand out on the AR vision until you're right next to it. And unfortunately, if you want to max out all your characters, you have to find all collectibles, as the missions give upgrade tokens. While you certainly don't have to do these missions, if you're a completionist and want all your characters max leveled, you'll have to hunker down and get a guide out with all the locations. Finally, there are also time trials for both the Bat Cycle and each character's mode of transportation. While these aren't too hard, they can be annoying to do with certain traversal methods. I'm looking at you, Red Hood. Luckily, the rewards for these time trials are just cosmetic color palettes for the Bat Cycle, so these missions are a bit easier to skip than the collectibles, unless you're really a completionist. A feature that really surprises me was the built-in photo mode. Initially, Initially, I passed this feature off as a lot of games have photo modes, and they all seem pretty similar. However, once I activated the photo mode and took a moment to look through all the settings, I was pretty impressed with all the choices you have. While you have the usual options to change the camera settings, there's also settings for your character that allow you to alter how they look for the photo. There's an option to choose facial expressions as well as different body poses that allow you to really bring your own creative touch and tune the photos to just how you like. There's also this really creepy feature where you can have the character always look at the camera, and it's so weird to watch them frozen but have their head turned towards the camera, slowly following it. It's hilarious and scary at the same time. Another thing I enjoyed about the camera feature is that it can be activated anytime via the pause menu, although there is an option to do it through the D-pad. However, using the pause menu is by far the superior method as it can help you capture the coolest moments. If you want to use the D-pad option, it takes a few seconds to navigate to it, meaning you can miss a cool shot you want to capture. I've never really used photo mode before, but it actually ended up being really helpful, especially if you're creating this video. It gives you a lot of creative freedom, and I've also seen some really cool shots online that people have taken, and they look really impressive. Next, I want to talk about the crafting, gear, and mod system in Gotham Knights. While out doing missions, there's a chance that defeated enemies will drop either crafting materials, gear blueprints, gear being suits, melee weapons, and ranged weapons, or mod chips, which can all be used to upgrade your character's power level. This is a completely new system that wasn't present in any form in the Arkham series, and it was a very controversial topic when the game was revealed. There were concerns that the game would be a grind fest, and that you would have to do side missions for hours in order to power up your characters with new gear. I was also skeptical of this feature, as I had tried out the Adventures game, which had a similar mechanics, and I found that I, indeed, did have to grind for upgrades in order to beat missions, which I was not a fan of. However, I'm happy to report that this game handled the concept much better and in a more balanced way. While true that you do have to find the gear, I never felt like I had to go out of my way to grind for gear. By simply doing story missions, side missions, and the free roam crime stopping missions while patrolling, I was given more than enough gear to power up my characters and keep pace with the enemy power level. There's usually chests at the end of story missions that will grant you gear, and missions and side missions almost always reward you with gear. And if you find your suit or weapons to be underpowered, you can always use your mod chips to up your power level. While the weapons do look a little different, usually there's a few different models or color variants of weapons. I would say that the real standout from the gear category is the suits. Each character has 11 different suit styles, totaling to 44 across all 4 characters, although the Beyond and Nightwatch suit styles are locked to the Deluxe and Collector's Editions, which is also now available as a separate DLC. I bought the base game for $21 and got the Visionary Pack, which includes all the Collector's Edition content on sale for $10. However, I will say that I was a little disappointed with the content of it. While I do enjoy the Beyond suit style, it was never my favorite out of the styles, and I found myself never using it. Meanwhile, the Nightwatch transmog, which included some of the most iconic designs of the characters by the very talented Jim Lee, felt off to me. Something about the sleekness of the comic suits looked like it didn't fit in with the world, and the fact that I couldn't customize the suits as it was a transmog didn't help either. In this game, transmogs are basically style-locked versions of the suits that you can use to override a suit style. For example, let's say my favorite suit for Batgirl is her Eternal suit, but the only one I have is underleveled compared to her Shinobi style. Well, I can use the Eternal transmog, and it will apply the Eternal style over the stats of the Shinobi suit. It's not a bad idea, but I also found that it lacking, as I liked being able to customize my suits, which transmogs blocked. You can customize every suit style with 3 different masks, emblems, gloves, and boots, as well as the option to apply a colorway, which changes the colors of your suit. I found that instead of using a transmog, I would just use mod chips to level up the suit I liked until I found a stronger version of it. I actually found that I ended up really vibing with a lot of the suit designs, and I appreciated the extra effort by the devs of being able to customize each suit, and I found myself surprised when I actually ended up liking some of the more unique styles, like Batgirl's privateer/pirate style, or Red Hood's Japanese shinobi style. All in all, I think that collecting all the gear and customizing the suits was one of my favorite aspects of the game, and it was always fun to unlock a new suit and go through and see what customization options it had. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about is Gotham City itself. The Arkham games always had good map design, with lots of interesting buildings and features that let them feel unique and memorable. However, with Gotham Knights, they seem to want to craft a bit of a different Gotham. While the Gotham of the Arkham series is very compact and vertical, minus some outlying areas, the Gotham Knights Gotham is a bit more open and less vertical. While there are certainly a lot of tall buildings, a majority of them appear to be in the downtown area, while the other areas of the map have other features that make them a bit more unique. For example, there's a large park, a university, a cemetery, a dock area, and several factories that appear in other areas of the map. While this is a bit of fresh air compared to the Arkham map, I also couldn't help but feel like Rocksteady nailed the Gotham vibes a bit better. Their map felt like it was designed with more care and attention, while the Gotham Knights map was maybe a bit more generic. While I enjoyed some of the newer elements they added, I can't think of many parts of the map that actually made me stop and take it in and enjoy it. Gotham Knights also lacked a lot of interior parts of the map that the Arkham games had. It felt like a majority of the game took place mostly outside with only a handful of interior locations. Compare this to the Arkham games where there are multiple different interior locations with their own different vibes and atmospheres to them that help break up gameplay and differentiate from the basic Gotham City vibe. So, does Gotham Knights live up to the example of the Batman Arkham series? Well, That's kind of a hard question to answer. While I think the Arkham series is certainly better in most aspects, I also have to point out that they likely wanted Gotham Knights to stand out on its own and try to distance it from the Arkham series on purpose. I certainly think that a lot of effort was put into the game, and you can tell that there was a lot of emphasis on being relatively accurate to other DC media. There's also a sense of world building that comes with creating a new universe, and I thought that the storyline they decided to tell with this game, while ending a bit cliche and dull, was still interesting and had a good solid backbone by being built off the interpersonal relationships of the Bat family as they connected through the death of Batman. Did Gotham Knights live up to the Arkham series? No. But was it trying to? I don't think so. Either way, while I went into the game expecting to dislike it, I ended up actually relatively enjoying it once I looked past my Arkham bias. In fact, while it probably won't happen, I wouldn't even mind getting a second game in the series. I think that if they punched the writing and gameplay up a notch, a second game would come out even better than the first and surprise everyone. While I'm not sure I would buy the game for full price, I didn't feel cheated that I ended up only paying $31 for the game plus all the DLC, and I would probably recommend it at or around that price. And we've reached the end of the video. If you found it helpful and enjoyable, consider leaving a like, subscribing, and leaving a comment with your thoughts on the game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.